Welcome to Creepy Corner Stories, where the shadows whisper and the darkness holds secrets you were never meant to hear. Tonight, we dive into the depths of fear, unraveling the scariest horror stories that will send chills down your spine. These are tales of the unknown, the unexplained, and the utterly terrifying. So turn off the lights, lock your doors, and prepare yourself. Because once you step into the creepy corner, there's no turning back. Let's begin. If you dare. Story: The Haunting in Apartment 713. When Lisa moved into her brand new apartment, she thought she was starting fresh. Everything was modern, untouched, no history, no ghosts of the past. Or so she thought. The first night was peaceful. The second night, she heard tapping from the ceiling. Maybe the pipes? The third night, it was louder, 3 slow knocks, like someone was inside the walls. By the end of the first week, she noticed her belongings shifting. Keys left on the counter would be in the bathroom. Closet doors she swore were closed would be wide open by morning. But the worst was the reflection. One evening, as Lisa was brushing her teeth, she caught a glimpse of something in the mirror. A shadow, standing just behind her, unmoving. Her breath hitched, but when she spun around, nothing. Just the empty apartment. Convinced she was imagining things, Lisa tried to shake it off. But then the whispers started. Late at night, when the world was silent, she would hear a voice, faint, distant, murmuring from the vents. "Get out." Lisa froze, her heart hammering in her chest. Maybe it was just the neighbors? She pressed her ear against the wall, but there was nothing. The next night, she woke up at 3:13 a.m. to the sound of her bedroom door creaking open. Her apartment was locked. No one else had a key. Then she saw it. A figure stood at the foot of her bed, tall, impossibly thin, its face blurred like a smudge in reality. It didn't move. It only watched. Lisa couldn't breathe. Her body was frozen in terror. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the figure melted into the darkness. The next morning, she broke her lease and left without looking back. Months later, she heard the news. A construction worker had died during the building's development, buried in a collapse on the 7th floor. The same floor her apartment had been on. They never recovered his body. And to this day, residents of apartment 713 still complain about the tapping, the whispers, and the shadow that watches from the darkness. Story: The Tenant in 406. When Jake moved into his new apartment, he was relieved to find a place so clean and modern for such a cheap price. The landlord seemed eager to rent it out, handing over the keys with an odd warning. "If anything strange happens, just ignore it." Jake laughed it off. Strange? What could possibly happen in a brand new building? The first week was uneventful, but by the second week, he started hearing noises at night, faint footsteps pacing above him. But when he asked the building manager, he was met with a confused stare. "There's no one above you, sir. The 4th floor has been vacant for months." Jake brushed it off. Maybe it was the pipes settling, maybe the manager was just mistaken. Then came the knocking. At exactly 3:06 a.m., a slow, deliberate knock echoed from his front door. Knock, knock, knock. Heart pounding, Jake looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. He swung the door open, nothing, just silence. The knocking happened again the next night, and the night after. Always at 3:06 a.m. Then, on the 5th night, he decided to stay up and wait. At exactly 3:06, the knocking started. This time, when he peered through the peephole, his stomach dropped. A woman stood outside, but something was wrong. Her head was tilted at an unnatural angle, her long dark hair hanging over her face. Her hands, pale and thin, pressed against the door. She wasn't knocking anymore, she was scraping. Jake held his breath as she whispered, "Let me in, I used to live here." His blood ran cold. Slamming the deadbolt, he stumbled backward. The scraping stopped. The next morning, he went straight to the building manager, demanding answers. The manager sighed, rubbing his temples. "You should leave, Jake. Apartment 406, it belonged to a woman who died last year. She fell from her balcony. No one knows why." Shaken, Jake packed his bags, deciding to break his lease. But that night, as he grabbed his suitcase, his phone buzzed with a new notification. It was a photo. A picture taken inside his apartment, of him, sleeping, with a woman standing over his bed. Jake ran, and he never looked back. To this day, apartment 406 remains empty. But every night at 3:06 a.m., the knocking continues, waiting for someone new to answer. Story: The Last Prisoner of Cell 3. The old Blackwater police station had been abandoned for nearly 2 decades. Officers refused to work there, and locals whispered about the things that lurked in its empty halls. But when a new precinct took over, the city decided to reopen the building. Officer Daniel Hayes was among the first to be assigned there. He had heard the rumors, stories of strange voices, flickering lights, and cold spots that made the station unbearable. But he wasn't superstitious. To him, it was just an old building. That was until he heard the banging. It started late at night, deep in the station's holding cells, a single rhythmic pounding on the metal bars of Cell 3. At first, he assumed it was just the pipes, but when he went to check, his stomach dropped. The cell was locked, empty. And yet, the sound continued. Bang, bang, bang. Goosebumps rose on his arms as he stepped closer. A shadow flickered in the dim light just beyond the bars. It was there, and then it was gone. Hayes turned on his radio. "Hey, dispatch, is anyone else in the building?" A pause. Then the response crackled through. "Negative. You're alone." He felt a chill race down his spine. Something was wrong. The next night, the security cameras picked up movement, a dark figure pacing back and forth inside Cell 3. But when officers checked in person, it was empty. Determined to get answers, Hayes dug into the station's past. What he found made his blood run cold. Years ago, a man had been locked up in Cell 3. A violent suspect, ranting about seeing things, shadows that whisper. The officers ignored him, until the next morning. They found him hanging from the cell bars. His face twisted in terror. The autopsy revealed something chilling. His neck wasn't broken. Something had strangled him. But there were no fingerprints. Ever since, strange things kept happening. Officers heard muffled screams, heavy footsteps, and whispers that called them by name. Some even claimed to see a figure standing in Cell 3, staring, waiting. That was the final straw. The station was shut down, left to rot. But now, with its reopening, the past refuses to stay buried. And every night, at exactly 3:15 a.m., the sound returns. Bang, bang, bang. As if someone, or something, is still trapped inside. Story: The Cursed Town of Ravens Hollow. Deep in the mountains, hidden from the world, lies Ravens Hollow, a town with a dark history, one that no one dares to speak of. The town still stands, but its streets are silent, its houses are abandoned, and those who enter never leave the same. It all started in 1886. Ravens Hollow was a thriving mining town, its people hardworking and proud. But one night, the mine collapsed, burying 32 men alive. Their bodies were never recovered, and their families claimed to hear their screams echoing through the hills long after the disaster. Then, the deaths began. One by one, the townspeople vanished. Some were found days later, their bodies twisted in unnatural positions, their faces frozen in expressions of sheer terror. Others were never seen again, their homes left untouched, as if they had simply walked into the woods and never returned. The survivors spoke of shadowy figures watching from the trees, whispers carried by the wind, and unseen hands tapping on their windows at night. Children woke up with deep scratches on their arms, crying about the man with no face who stood at the foot of their beds. Desperate, the remaining townsfolk turned to Eleanor Grayson, a woman accused of witchcraft years before. She warned them, "The spirits of the dead are not at rest. You built this town on cursed ground. Leave now, or suffer their wrath." They didn't listen. That winter, the snow fell thicker than ever before, trapping the townspeople inside. The food ran out, the animals froze to death, and then, one by one, the town descended into madness. By the time the first thaw came, a group of travelers arrived, only to find Ravens Hollow completely abandoned. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just an eerie silence and houses left as if their owners had walked away in the middle of dinner. The only clue was a message, scratched into the walls of the town church. The hollow takes what it's owed. To this day, no one knows what happened to the people of Ravens Hollow. But those who dare to step into the town after dark report seeing shadowy figures lurking in the alleys, hearing footsteps behind them, and feeling unseen eyes watching their every move. Some claim they hear whispers, begging for help. Others never return. And if you stand in the center of town at midnight, you can still hear the sound of 100 voices screaming from beneath the ground. Story: The Hanging Tree. There's a tree just outside of town, standing alone in the middle of a forgotten field. Gnarled and ancient, its twisted branches reach out like skeletal fingers. The locals call it the Hanging Tree. No one dares go near it after dark. It's said that long ago, a man named Thomas Grayson was hanged there for a crime he didn't commit. The townspeople accused him of murdering a farmer's daughter, though no proof was ever found. But fear makes people reckless. And before the sun had even set, a noose was tied around his neck. His last words chilled them to the bone. "You will regret this, and I will never leave." They left his body to rot, but the next morning, something was wrong. His corpse was gone. The noose dangled from the tree, swaying in the wind, but his body was never found. That's when the sightings began. At night, a dark figure was seen hanging from the tree, swaying without wind. Some said they heard whispers in the air, choked sobs, and the sound of a rope tightening. Then people started dying. A group of teenagers trying to prove their bravery camped beneath the tree one summer night. By morning, only one survived. He was found in the dirt, eyes wide with terror, his face pale as death. He never spoke again. But he did manage to write one thing before his mind shattered. A single word, scrawled over and over on the walls of his hospital room: noose. To this day, people say if you stand under the hanging tree at midnight, you'll hear the creak of a rope tightening above you. And if you look up, you might just see a pair of cold, dead eyes staring back. But whatever you do, don't stay too long, because some say Thomas Grayson is still looking for a soul to take his place. Story: The Playmates. When Sarah and her husband moved into their new home, they were excited for a fresh start with their two kids, Emma, 6, and Noah, 4. The house was old but beautiful, sitting on a quiet street with a large backyard, perfect for the kids to play in. The first few weeks were normal. Then, Emma started talking about her new friends. "Their names are Lily and James," she said one night at dinner. "They live here too." Sarah and her husband exchanged glances. The house was empty before they moved in. "That's nice, sweetie," Sarah said, assuming they were imaginary friends. But as the days passed, strange things started happening. One afternoon, Sarah walked past the playroom and stopped. The toys were moving, by themselves. Dolls shifted, blocks stacked on their own, and the little toy train rolled across the floor with no one touching it. She stepped inside, her heart pounding. The air was ice cold. "Emma? Noah?" she called, but they were outside. The moment she blinked, everything went still. The room was silent. That night, Noah giggled in his sleep. Sarah leaned over him and froze. Tiny fingerprints, not his, were pressed into the blankets beside him. She whispered to Emma the next morning, "Where did Lily and James come from?" Emma shrugged. "They were here before us. They said they used to have a mommy too, but she's gone now." Sarah's stomach turned. Things escalated quickly. One night, the baby monitor crackled and a soft voice whispered, "Come play with us." Sarah ran to the kids' room, but both were sound asleep. Terrified, she started researching the house's history. What she found made her blood run cold. Years ago, a family lived there. A mother, father, and their 2 children, Lily and James. One winter night, the father, driven mad by something unseen, locked the doors and set the house on fire. The mother managed to break a window and escape, but the children never made it out. The mother never forgave herself. She returned to the house every night, standing outside whispering for her babies, until one day she vanished too. Sarah slammed the laptop shut. That night she heard the laughter again, but this time there was something else. A woman's voice, crying, echoing through the halls. "Where are my children?" The next morning Sarah packed their bags. As they left, Emma turned back and waved. "Bye, Lily. Bye, James." And then in a voice barely above a whisper, she added, "Tell your mommy not to be sad anymore." Sarah never told Emma what she had learned, but as they drove away she glanced in the rearview mirror, and for just a moment, she saw 2 pale children standing in the window, smiling. Story: Grandma in the Hallway. It started as a rumor, a ghostly old woman wandering the halls of Westwood Elementary after dark. The janitors whispered about her, and the night security guard swore he once saw a shadow rocking in an invisible chair. But no one expected her to start talking to the children. Mia was only 8 when she first met Grandma. It happened on a rainy afternoon, long after most students had gone home. She was waiting for her mom when she felt a cold hand brush her hair. "You remind me of my granddaughter," a soft, crackling voice whispered behind her. Mia spun around. An old woman sat on the hallway bench. Her silver hair was neatly tied in a bun, and her eyes, though kind, seemed wrong, like they didn't belong to someone alive. "Be careful on the stairs, dear," the woman said. Mia blinked. When she opened her eyes again, the woman was gone. That night, Mia told her mom about Grandma. Her mother went pale. "Who told you that name?" she asked. "She did," Mia said. Her mother's hands trembled. "Mia, Grandma died 10 years ago, and she never visited your school." Mia couldn't sleep that night, but the next morning, she found something in her backpack, a butterscotch candy, Grandma's favorite. From that day on, other children started seeing her. Some claimed she held their hands when they were scared. Others said she tucked them in if they dozed off during story time. But then, things changed. One boy, Jason, tried to run down the stairs one day when something grabbed his shirt and pulled him back. The teacher screamed as he stumbled, just as the wooden railings snapped and crashed below. Had he taken one more step, he would have fallen. When Jason caught his breath, he swore he heard a voice whisper in his ear. "Told you to be careful on the stairs, dear." The school principal started looking into the building's history. What they found was chilling. Decades ago, before the school was built, there was a house on that land. An old woman had lived there, a widow who loved children, especially her granddaughter. One winter, her granddaughter fell down the stairs and died. The woman never forgave herself, and when she passed away years later, she made a promise. "I will never let another child fall." To this day, if you're alone in the halls of Westwood Elementary, you might feel a soft hand on your shoulder. You might smell butterscotch in the air, and if you're near the stairs, you might just hear a whisper, "Be careful, dear." Story: The Midnight Playtime. When Olivia and her husband moved into their new house, they were excited. It was an old but charming place with a big backyard and a spacious kitchen, perfect for their growing family. But from the very first night, something felt off. Their 2-year-old son, Leo, started giggling at nothing. "What's funny, sweetheart?" Olivia asked one evening. Leo pointed to the empty kitchen. "Kids play." Her stomach twisted. There were no other kids in the house. That night, Olivia woke up to strange noises from the kitchen. Clink, clatter, giggle. She nudged her husband awake. "Do you hear that?" They both crept downstairs, expecting to find Leo out of bed. But when they turned on the light, the kitchen was empty, except for the chairs. The dining chairs had been pulled away from the table, as if someone had just been sitting there. And the sugar jar? It was open, with tiny handprints pressed into the white grains. Leo was fast asleep upstairs. The next day, Olivia tried to brush it off. Maybe she forgot to push the chairs in. Maybe she left the sugar jar open. But that night, it happened again. More noises, more giggling. Then at 3 a.m., the sound of small running footsteps on the tile. Olivia rushed to the kitchen and froze. The refrigerator door was wide open, the cereal box was on the floor, and the faint sound of children's laughter echoed through the room. She took a shaky breath and whispered, "Who's there?" The laughter stopped. For a moment, all she could hear was the hum of the fridge. Then, tiny feet scurried away, right past her. The air went ice cold. She barely slept that night. The next morning, she found Leo playing with an extra set of toy cars. "Where did you get those, honey?" she asked. Leo grinned. "My friends gave them to me." A chill ran down her spine. That night, Olivia left a baby monitor in the kitchen, just to be sure. At exactly 3 a.m., it crackled to life. A child's voice whispered, "Want to play?" The next day, she called the previous owner. The woman on the phone went silent before finally saying, "You've seen them, haven't you? The twins." Olivia's hands shook. "Twins? They lived there before me," the woman said. "Died in a fire. They loved playing in the kitchen. They don't mean harm. They just don't know they're gone." That was enough. Olivia and her family moved out a week later. But sometimes, when she's alone at night, she swears she still hears tiny footsteps running across the floor and soft, ghostly giggles. And that is the end of tonight's terrifying tale. But tell me, do you think these stories are just legends? Or is there something lurking in the dark, waiting to be discovered? The world is full of mysteries, whispers of the past that refuse to be forgotten. Perhaps the next time you hear a strange sound in the night, or feel unseen eyes watching you, you'll remember these stories. Sleep well, if you can, and if you enjoyed this chilling journey into the unknown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, because there are many more nightmares waiting to be told. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and whatever you do, don't turn around.